witnessed the birth of a being. It happened as I was watching the scientist in the white lab coat up on the stage behind the table with the glass beaker on it pour first sugar and then sulfuric acid into the beaker before backing up and watching this chemical monster emerge from the depths of the beaker and climb down the table and coil onto the floor before eventually drifting away. And this was some time after the focus had shifted. And I saw that creation, and I saw that power, and I liked it. Now, along with mad science, that first science experience there were other threads of science that came into the tapestry that I learned to wear as part of my daily existence. There was Bill Nye that I saw on TV, and Magic School Bus, and Bug Summer Camp, and with all of these, they were so integrated into my daily life that it became a fact of life. And that's what I grew to love about science, the facts. So when I was in first grade, I did my first ever science project on bird feathers, simply because I loved to collect them. And I learned about all the components of the feathers and the parts and where they came from and how that influenced the bird's ability, like the tail feathers that acted as rudders for the birds and the down feathers that kept them warm. And I would happily tell anybody who came by my poster setup all the facts that I had learned and all the tidbits of knowledge that I could share and impart. And eventually I'd tell anybody who would care to listen all about these birds and the feathers. And there was a lot of power in that, being able to share the knowledge. So fast forward to high school. It was my senior year and I was learning to do capstone projects, so experiments by myself, including one in psychology, where I'd eagerly pull in classmates into an empty music classroom and show them little note cards with faces on them. And one half of my classmates, I had just look at the eyes and tell me the color of the eyes. And the other half, I had rate the attractiveness of the faces, thinking that the attention to attraction would be extra motivation for the remembrance of the faces. And then I had a second deck of cards with some of the previous decks mixed in, and I tested out whether they could correctly identify the faces. And through this project, I learned that I could design and carry out my own experiments. And this was another source of power for me. But I also recognized that there was a long way to go on the course of being a scientist, and so I rushed into college with fervor, taking all the classes I could, biology and chemistry and physics, all the labs, with experiments that were quantifiable and directly measurable. And I was succeeding. And I was building on that knowledge. And I was gaining momentum and planting flags in my mountain as I was scaling it. And I achieved the highest score in my organic chemistry national test out of my organic chemistry class. And I achieved the highest rank of research undergraduate, research fellow, within Arizona State University. And I was doing research on bullfrogs and on bullfrog brains, and on how seasonal changes like light that lead to changes in reproduction might also lead to seasonal changes in the creation of new brain cells that might modulate reproduction. And all of this was leading me to stand very high on my mountain and very proud. And then I met somebody my junior year of college, and she was passionate and willowy, an actress, and a vegan. Now, the stars that aligned and brought us together probably didn't account for the fact that an animal rights activist and an animal researcher might have irreconcilable differences. Nonetheless, we got to know each other, and she developed some curiosities and questions about neuroscience and started making her own questions. Questions like, so we know that mollusks have a very simple brain, not as complex as ours by far. But does this mean that they can still experience existential pain like we do and that we shouldn't eat them? And trees exhibit orientation toward light and water, so could this indicate a slow consciousness? That means that chopping down a forest for lumber or for paper would be tantamount to a slaughterhouse. I have no idea how to handle this. These questions were totally outside of the rigor and the control of the power that I had learned to wield within class and within the lab. And it started to sour our relationship. At dinner, she grew a little cold, and I grew a little distant. And the tofu just wasn't tasty anymore. So I turned to the authorities in my life, the science royalty that I knew, and I went to a graduate student in my lab named Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah was so chill. He was so chill that I thought it would be totally easy to steamroll him and get him to regurgitate any of the information that I wanted to hear from him. So I said, "Hey, Jeremiah, so we do research on animals. So isn't it ridiculous that to think that these animals could possibly experience something as profound as psychological pain or..." And he said, "Well, we've got to be very careful because it goes both ways. We can't say that they do experience psychological pain or human emotions or experiences that humans have, but we can't say that they don't." I was really dissatisfied with this answer. I wanted something clear cut, and I felt myself slipping on my mountain. And so I appealed to my king of kings at the time, my boss, my PI. And I found myself in his office. And I casually slipped in a question about pain perception and consciousness and animal research, and unwittingly opened a torrent of philosophy and curiosity and profound respect for animal life that I had never experienced in this man. And he said to me, "Our knowledge is only as good as our data, and our data is only as good as our tools. So the best we can do with these questions is to be aware of research from the past and temper it with a healthy respect for the limitations of our inquiries." And this reminded me of something that I learned in a philosophy class in high school, theory of knowledge. You see, there are different ways that we integrate and experience reality. Whether it's sense perception and reason, like what we see in science, or language and emotion, like what my girlfriend is using. And furthermore, there are different parts of the knowledge that we see and experience that we can pay attention to. And I realized that I'd only been focusing on the positive parts. I'd only been looking at what I knew and what I knew I didn't know. But I was ignoring all of the gray space and all of the unknown of what I didn't know I knew and what I didn't know I didn't know. So there wasn't really any conclusion to our discussion. The relationship continued to deteriorate, and eventually we dissolved and split up for that and other reasons. And the vegan actress gained an interest in neuroscience and actually joined a lab looking at the fit of animal models in neuroscience and won a couple of awards. And I continued with my research. I got my honors thesis and moved to Spain to continue to do research in the creation of new brain cells. And then I came here to Mount Sinai. And I'm still doing animal research. And I'm looking at depression, and I'm looking at how stress might alter the landscape of three-dimensional DNA within the brain. And I'm still not really sure how I feel about the animal research. But it's okay. Because that gray, that space of not knowing, that space for curiosity, Isn't that what science is really about?